Well, here I am back today. Let's see, yesterday was 2 weeks since I had my last hand surgery. Really close so you can see it. Um, and then this is the one that's been, yesterday was 5 weeks ago. Now, I want to tell you that they're very sore. Just because they look good doesn't mean that they're not sore. Now, I'm doing just about everything that I was driving, although it kind of hurts. I mean, these where they cut the transverse ligament, I mean, right through here, they just really damage that area in there to the point where it hurts a lot. This one actually that was just done a couple of weeks ago, it's still bruised in here. But I will say also that I'm expecting that they would be this way and will be getting better. If they do not, I will be going back to the doctor. They did say they wanted to see me again in 6 weeks. But if I don't see what I feel like I need to see, I will be going back. If I'm fine with it, I won't. I'm planning to go back, spend the money to do that. But they're tender. In here, they're tender. They. It's hard to use the scissors. It's hard to use a knife. You can't pry things open. In general, they are like sensitive. Like the other day, I was using the top of something and it kind of poked down in there. I thought I was going to take the top of my head off. But in general, they are much easier to use than I expected. But there's one thing. After I had this surgery, I pretty much felt really good. Well, the first 10 days, you have a splint on your hand, and I'll tell you a little bit about the process later. It's a splinted kind of a soft cast. So you can't move that up and down. So when you're in the bed at night, you don't need that splint because you can't move anyway. So as soon as they took that off and took the stitches out, I never did wear that splint anymore. And pretty much it's good. This one, not that way. When they took the splint off, I've been having to wear, the first couple of nights I tried to do without the splint, and I have not been able to. I talked to the doctor about this when I was in last, and if this would happen, and he said, well, it could take a long time for that nerve to be healed. So I'm a little disappointed that I'm not seeing the same results out of this one as I did here. And neither one of them were bothering me more so than the other one when we started this process. And it's my right hand that is giving me the least trouble. So I'm wearing my splint because I have to sleep. And I will try to not use it maybe in a few days. Give it a week, okay? But I can definitely tell a difference when I'm using my cell phone. Like, I would talk on my cell phone. I'd be going back and forth because my hands would be falling asleep. And when I drove, my hands would fall asleep. But that's not happening. So that's good. It's just at night. I do notice that the sensation of the tingling during the day is just not really there. If it is, it's a lot less noticeable. It's just the numbness at night that's really bothering me still in this hand. But the whole process is actually interesting because the surgery itself is a breeze. It's so pain-free and such a breeze that I would recommend the surgery to anybody before suffering. But the recovery is not as simple as that. But let me tell you a little bit about the whole process. You go in to see the doctor, and then they set this whole thing up after he does this little test on you. And he may send you actually for an electric test. They had not done that for me because the first thing I did with the doctor was get steroid shots, and they helped. If the steroid shots did the trick, then they say, yep, that's what you need done. So I went in, and then I had to go back in for pre-op, so they explain to you everything that you have to do and you can't do before surgery and that sort of stuff. And then you go in the day of surgery. You cannot eat anything or drink anything after midnight. I thought, they're not putting us to totally asleep, so why? But they do give you the same drug they give you for colonoscopy, which I think is fentanyl. I don't remember. Anyway, but you go in, you have to take your nail polish off, and you can't wear any jewelry or anything like that because all that stuff has to come off. You go in, and then you have to sign all these papers, all these release forms, like to giving them, so you can't sue them. And you go in, the nurse has you change into your clothes and go to the bathroom. And they ask you, of course, if you've eaten, and you change your clothes, and you're in this complete outfit thing. And you get in the bed, and then they come over, and a nurse asks you all your questions, and she puts the IV in the opposite hand, which my nurse was fabulous. It didn't hurt at all. And then on the other side, another nurse comes in and scrubs your hand down like crazy. I mean, they take this razor and shave all the hair off in that area on the top and the bottom, and then they scrub it underneath your nails, and they cover it with a towel so nobody sneezes on it. And then the anesthesiologist comes in, and he talks to you a little bit and tells you what he's going to do. He's going to put in a block in your shoulder right here. Now, I didn't realize it the first time around, but I figured it out and asked some questions the second time around. But they don't give you anything that's like a no-care drug or anything like that, because they're waiting around for the doctor to see what the timing is on when you're going to be going in. If somebody's running late, they want to shift you up, or somebody's taking longer. And so he comes in when he thinks it's time, because I think these blocks take about 20 to 30 minutes. And he tells you that he is going to give you something to relax you. Well, no joke. It's not something to relax you. He's giving you the same thing they're going to give you. Ask about this in the operating room. The same thing they give you for a colonoscopy. It's just a quick dose, though. And you don't even know what's happening. I mean, she puts it in your arm, and you go to sleep. He puts the block in, and the next thing you know, you're like, okay, when are you going to put the block in? He says, I've already done that. I asked why they did that, and they said because that is such a sensitive and dangerous thing. They cannot have you move. And that's the reason that you can't have your husband or wife or friend or whatever back there until that's over with. They can't have anybody flinch. And so after that point in time, they'll call out whoever you brought with you. And keep in mind, that person has to stay there the entire time. And they also have to agree in writing that they're not going to leave you that day. And I'll tell you about that later. Because now that your arm is getting numb, it starts tingling, and then, man, it gets hot. Your hand and arm gets so hot. And you lay there, and you're like, you can't even lift your arm. But by this time, though, it's about time to go in the operating room. So then the operating room, the doctor's surgery nurse comes in. Sometimes the anesthetist comes in, too. And they roll you back in the operating room. This is a full-fledged operating room that I was in. And the anesthetist says, I'm going to be putting in your IV now a intravenous prophylactic antibiotic. And they do that. They did that both times. And they're going to give you an antibiotic at the pharmacy to take for 6 days also. Mine gave me some anti-nausea medicine, because some people get kind of queasy over this whole thing, and I didn't need that. And they're also going to give you a prescription when you leave that day in writing for some pain meds, and they have to do that in writing, I understand now. But she puts that in your arm, and the surgeon's nurse kind of preps you up a little bit. Mine talked to me, and she put me off on the on a kind of like a little board here, stuck this board underneath me, and then they put the tourniquet around me, and the next thing I knew, I was asleep. And then the next thing, I was waking up in the recovery area, which is just another little area. And they're watching you and taking your blood pressure and watching your heart and taking your temperature. And they immediately, when you get that back there, they're going to ask you if you want something to drink, and immediately you're going to want it because you haven't had anything. And they're going to sit there and monitor you for a while, and they're going to call the person to come back. And they do. And then a little bit later, they said, well, I was ready to go. I don't guess I stayed in recovery more than 45 minutes. Unless you're having trouble, of course. And you're really groggy. What I mean is you're not feeling any pain. You're not really all that sleepy, but you're not feeling any pain. And your arm is so heavy. Of course, you have to pick it up. It's really crazy. So what they do is they send your person out to get the car, and they help you get your clothes on, which is a real interesting thing, because with that arm, it's just the weirdest feeling you ever. I mean, it's nothing like it. It's just weird. They get you in there, and they put you in your wheelchair and roll you out to the car, and you're good, but you're like very wobbly. And so after that, then you're in the car. My husband and I went and got something to eat because I was fine. And I ate with my other hand and had some soup. They tell you to eat something light. And you go home and you tend to take it easy the rest of the day, but I didn't want to sleep at all either time. I was fine. I didn't need anything. And I wasn't in any pain because until I went to bed that night, my arm was numb. Now, towards the time that I got ready to go to bed, it was beginning to wake up. And they told me when my fingers started tingling again that I needed to go ahead and take my pain med. Well, I did that, although I really didn't need it, to be honest with you, because I wasn't hurting at all. And the next day, I didn't take my pain meds at all. I just took an Advil, a couple of Advil that morning, and I think I took a couple of Advil that afternoon. Then I didn't eat anything to sleep. I didn't eat anything anytime other. I tell you, the most painful thing about the whole thing is the recovery. It's difficult. I will say also that the biggest problem with this whole surgery is the fact you don't have a hand. Now, it's good because you got legs. You can still walk, and if you exercise, you can run and all that sort of stuff. But use of your hands is just unbelievable. I mean, you just don't realize how bad you need your hands. I can't imagine anybody doing this twice. At the same time, if you're considering doing both of these at the same time, don't. And I know people that have done it, but I can tell you, don't. You really need a hand. I mean, for many, many, many reasons. But, until I got the stitches out, you can't, this thing is a big cotton ball with a ace bandage around it. And you can't move it. It protects that hand. It keeps you from hurting at all. You cannot get it wet. So we had to wrap me in plastic really good. And before I could get in the shower, before I could do anything, my husband had to do all the cooking and the dishes. And it was a real pain. And then after I got the stitches out, for the next 4 days, I wore a kitchen glove on my hand because when the water from the shower came down on it, it hurt it really bad. And then after that, it was fine. It's just a little tender. You want to be careful washing knives and stuff like that. But they tell you not to put Neosporin on it, that you can put, to wash it with soap and water. And you can put some vitamin E oil. I bought some bio oil because it really gets dried out and it's crusty right now because it needs some. But I don't think that it's really necessary to bandage it. They told me both times when they took the stitches out that it did not need a dressing on it. But I'll tell you, when I was at home, I didn't wear a dressing. But when I went out in public for 2-3 days, I wore a Band-Aid over it because it was still kind of an open sore. Now it's healed so much that it's okay. It could get germs in it, but I didn't like it before and I wanted to keep it covered up. It also protects you from sticking something in it, which would be very painful. But I also want to go back and tell you that the reason they need somebody with you that day is because you can't feel anything. You could set your hand on fire. You could burn yourself. You could get next to the stove and, it's unbelievable. Or you could bang and break your arm. You can't feel anything. So you need to be watched for the rest of the day. The next morning you'll be fine. But I will say, all in all, this was a good surgery experience. The whole saying, minor surgery is surgery on somebody else. You don't ever want to go under the knife. But I had a great experience. Resurgence in Atlanta did mine, and my doctor was good, although he was a typical arrogant doctor. I could tell, he had to be his professional self. But the nurses were wonderful. The facilities were wonderful. And I got the best of care. I felt good about everything. I just want to see the results. And I'm going to check back in with you again and let you know how this is going. But that's about it for today.